100 years ago, 5 Benedictines arrived in the lake-splashed hill country of Central Florida to establish a community of sisters who would embrace the challenge of serving the needs of the newly established Catholic colony of San Antonio, Florida. These gifted women took many risks in order to serve God, and, as St. Benedict taught, to prefer God's love above all others. The early days were pioneer years. The sisters functioned primarily as educators, although they also owned and managed a cattle farm, citrus groves, and a packing house. The sisters opened Holy Name Academy a few weeks after arriving in San Antonio. The school served as the sisters' lifeblood for 75 years until it closed in 1964 as they embarked upon a closer working association with St. Leo College. The Benedictine Sisters of Holy Name Priory are a group of vowed Christian women who seek God through lives of prayer and service according to the rule of St. Benedict. As part of the 1989 centennial celebration of the founding of the Benedictine Sisters of Florida, a few of the sisters gathered together recently to share their memories and their stories of the first 100 years.
You ask about who are Benedictines and did we have a special ministry. Well, St. Benedict, when he founded the order, did not have a special ministry in mind except gospel living and community life. Now, he was born in the year 480, so in 1980 we celebrated the 1,500th year of his birth. And so through these 1,500 years, the Benedictines have done all kinds of things, but whatever were the needs of the church at a particular time in history were always the thing that Benedictines did. So we had many different ministries, although hospitality was always one, and education was always one, because people would bring their young boys to the monastery to get an education. Some of them would stay and be monks, and some of them went back home. Some of the different ministries that they took, they did a lot of missionary work. The Benedictines were sent all over Europe and founded the central monasteries, founded what are now the universities, and also university cities. So St. Benedict is named the patron saint of Europe. The form of government was a chapter of all the members was a very important part of the form of government, and everybody contributed their opinions, but the abbot had the final say-so. And I was at Catholic University, and I said to somebody that if the Benedictine government sounds very much like the United States Constitution. And this was a historian that I was talking to, and he said, well, it is. The seeds of the Benedictine abbeys in England were the ones that the English common law was built on, and finally the Declaration of Independence and so on. So the American government is sort of a stepchild to the rule of St. Benedict.
And did you know, Sister, that there was a copy of the rule in the room when they wrote the Constitution?
No.
It was one of their resource books. I learned that from one of my historian professors.
I understand that not only are you the historian for the order, but you're also from a pioneer family who helped to settle San Antonio. Could you tell us about the early days and how Holy Name came to be?
Well, San Antonio was founded to be a Catholic colony with a central town, San Antonio, and small villages around on opposite each corner and each side. So St. Leo is on the east side, and St. Joseph is on the north side. And those are the only two outside villages left. San Antonio is still central. St. Anthony Church was the original parish. So we're actually still in St. Anthony's parish. The Judge Dunn came in 1881 and looking for a place to start his colony. And he was given the chance to get 50,000 acres for his colony because he had helped Hamilton Diston to bail Florida out of near bankruptcy. Diston bought 4 million acres of land for $1 million, and Florida was avoided bankruptcy. But he had all this land, and since Judge Dunn had helped in the legal aspects of getting it done, he gave him this choice of 50,000 acres that he could use for this colony of San Antonio. Now, then, by 1889, Gerard Piltz had invited sisters to come. That was the dream, to have elementary and secondary schools and colleges, so Catholics could educate their children in peace. And that was the whole aim of the San Antonio colony. And so the sisters came February 28th, 1889, and they used March 1st as their founding date, 1889. They moved into a building that had been built for a hotel, and they didn't want the hotel. Judge Dunn didn't want the hotel because it would attract the wrong kind of people, he thought. He wanted settlers, Catholic settlers. And so the bishop bought the hotel for a convent. And it was located in San Antonio, exactly across the plaza from St. Anthony's Church. That was where it was located at that time. And the sisters opened Holy Name Academy on March the 11th. They settled in on March the 1st, but they opened Holy Name Academy on March the 11th. And the first year at least, it was co-ed. Bernie Lyons said there were about 40 students in those first front rooms in the original Priory building. The first prioress of the first superior was Mother Dolorosa Scanlon. She was the leader of the group that came from Allegheny, Pennsylvania in 1889, and she was elected the first superior. And we know about her only from news articles. We don't have anything else except news articles in the magazines, but apparently she made a reputation for Holy Name Academy. She started it on March the 11th, 1889. And the academy was known throughout the state of Florida and was incorporated and chartered, I believe it was 1893. Is that right?
I think that's what I recall.
And then, so she...
Not that I was here, but that's what I've seen.
She and the other sisters did a good job of starting the academy. And then she became ill and died in 1895. And so the next superior was Mother Boniface Feldman from 1895 to 98. And that was during her term of office, was the year of the terrible freezes, when everybody's grove was frozen, the trees and roots and all that sort of thing. Such a freeze that comes only once every 100 years. We had it in the 80s this year, recently, and all our trees were destroyed. Then Mother Boniface spoke German. She was a native of Germany, and she spoke German. And the abbot of Cullman, Alabama, St. Bernard's, asked our sisters to send some German-speaking sisters to Cullman for his schools. And so after some negotiating with the bishops, they went in 1898, 5 sisters from Holy Name Priory. So that left just a few remaining. And Mother Rosemary was elected then in 1898, and she became superior for the next 40 years except 3, 1898 to 1938. She was superior in different terms, 3-year terms. And the only interruption was Sister Immaculate, Mother Immaculate, and she became superior in 1924 to 27. And then the biggest apostolate during that time were the Holy Name Academy. And in 1920 we opened St. Benedict's Prep, and our Sister Caroline and Sister Mary Grace and Sister Patricia were 3 of the people who entered in 1920. You ask about Sister Mary Grace. She started working with the boys, she and Sister Treese, in the boys' school in 1920.
And you said the early, in the early years of the academy. I think an interesting thing is that Senator Bob Graham's grandmother was one of the students here at the academy in the 1890s. They lived in Blanton at the time, and I think they paid her tuition by donating orange trees and, I believe, meat, a pig or something like that.
Didn't you mention yesterday that the samosas were here also?
The samosas, yes, but that was much later. That was in the 30s and 40s.
The middle years were a time of growth and expansion for these monastic sisters. The order remained small in number but continued to grow large in spirit and determination. Ever ready to meet the needs of the Catholic community both near and far, found the Benedictines rising to the challenges of serving not only several missions around the state of Florida, but as far away as Louisiana and Texas. Back home at Holy Name Convent, as it was called then, the sisters continued their focus on Holy Name Academy, by this time a boarding and day high school for girls. They boarded and taught grade school boys at St. Benedict's, also located on the grounds of the convent. They continued to teach grade school at St. Anthony's in San Antonio and at St. Joseph's School in St. Joseph, Florida. For several years during the 40s and 50s, the sisters operated Camp Jovita for girls on shoreline Lake Jovita. They taught religious education at the diocesan camp Good Counsel in Inverness, Florida, and they thought nothing of long round trips each week to teach Sunday school in the many Catholic missions in the area. Traditional customs remained during this period. The Mass was celebrated in Latin, and the Divine Office, also in Latin, was chanted several times a day. By this time, the women committed to the love of God in various stages of religious profession numbered in the 60s. Monastic life continued to prevail in a somewhat apostolic manner as the sisters sought to practice lives of prayer, work, community, and solitude.
From the time that we entered, that was the 1930s, that was during the Depression time when things were really very tight and so forth. And Mother Rosemary at that time was the superior. And our first meeting with her, I can remember, they were all waiting for us when the cars drove up from Tampa. And as we got out of the cars, we must have been a motley looking crew, because she said, "I have never seen such skinny looking girls." And they all were very, very skinny. And one of the things that she insisted upon that we had to have lunch at 10 and we had to have lunch at 3 to fatten us up, I suppose. But also the other thing that I can remember about her is our very first days. We were very homesick, and she was so very kind and considerate of all kinds. And also that we had to have recreation. We had to have some fun. And every afternoon with Sister Nunciata or Sister Rita, we would have to go down to the lake and go swimming or boating or whatever we wanted to do. And we did that for about an hour. I found that Mother Rosemary was a very kind and considerate person. Also very much in the cultural line. We needed to read. She had us read a great deal. And she was also very interested in our education, that would have to continue. And there's so many memories. There were times when she would sometimes say, I need to get away. And all we had was a little Model T Ford and 2-seater, that's all. And she would say, let's drive out into the woods. And we would just go driving. And sometimes she would talk, and sometimes we would just be silent the whole time. And that just is etched on our memory. And there were times when she would talk about a lot of political things that were going on here in Florida. And I think she was known by every politician. I think Sister Irma mentioned that yesterday. Every politician in the state knew her, and she knew them. And
all the local people too. She
the local
cultivated
people, she was very much involved with the local community, not only with just what's going on here in the community, here in our own community, but also outside.
What about our first Christmas? Remember?
No, I don't remember. You talk about it.
We were sitting in the old front room by a fireplace. She gave us wine and gifts because she was we were so homesick. We had to go home.
Yes. I don't remember. I don't recall.
I do.
Part of it. Yeah.
First Christmases are hard.
Right.
Yes, they were very hard.
Some of the things I remember reading about Mother Rose was that she was a great provider. And
She
especially
was.
during the Depression years, no one else in town could get credit. So Mother Rosemarie would get credit for the people so they could buy food
That's
and that kind of thing. She would guarantee that they'd be able to pay the grocer and that sort of thing. And she was always very concerned with the sisters. Sister Carolyn has written up some memories about Mother Rose was always concerned that they would have enough food, that in the summertime the work wouldn't be so heavy they'd die of the heat, and that they'd get fun. And she was really quite a lady. Some of the local folks have also told me she was a real horse trader. We started out with, I don't know, about 100 acres, and now we have about 250, 300 acres, and a lot of them are small plots that Mother bought on from tax sales and so forth in order to, make the property around the sisters their own so they could control who would be their neighbors and who would be up close to them.
She was also very conscious of looking into the future,
Yes.
what's going to happen. And I can remember those were the Depression years, and I remember my times in Slidell. That was really a very, very bad time. That was a time when the rationing was on. We had to give out ration tickets to the poor. And our school, Our Lady of Lourdes School in Slidell, was one of the schools. And every month, I think, is when they came out. And we had to give the ration tickets to the poor. And it was the hardest thing not to give them more, or they kept asking for more sugar, more gas tickets, and things like this. And I can remember an Episcopalian minister. He was dressed to the hilt, and we saw him coming up the walk, and one of the sisters said, "Here comes somebody who really needs." And all of us said, "He doesn't need." And he was begging for gas ration tickets and for sugar tickets for the poor in his parish. And it was the hardest thing to say, no, you can't have this much, because the government said you could give out only so many to the people that were screened. And these were hard times. But I think that's where Mother Rosemary also came in and said, give what you have to the poor. And I think we're still doing the same today. It's just a tradition that's just kind of carried on.
During the spread of years that she was superior, there were really hard times. Not only at the freeze, but then the people couldn't pay tuition. They would pay it in kind. and during then World War I, and then the Depression came, and she was always, like his sister said, the great provider. So part of her, that would be number one on her agenda, was to provide for the sisters and for the academy students. And when she, at the end of her life, at the end of her term, in 1938, she was very content to be able to say that the sisters had a roof over their heads and no debts. She was very complacent because she had struggled all these 40 years to make that come true.
And I think it was also during her time that we reached out to other parish schools. They had only St. Anthony's and St. Joe and the academy. And then it was through her then that we went to other areas to teach. And our salaries in those times, it was also still 1930s, the 30s, our salaries were $25 a month. And that's what we lived on. No insurance, no Social Security, no benefits, whatever. But we managed. And the people at that time were most generous to all the sisters. They appreciated anything that was done for them.
In New Orleans, I don't think we got paid at all for months.
Yes, but the salary was $25 a month, and that was it. But we managed, and we were happy. We had fun.
Isn't that how we got some of the grove? People planted the
That's
trees
right.
in payment
Yes.
for that tuition for the academy, replanted some of the land, and
But I think
also
it,
provided food.
and it was also at that time that we had enough groves, and our groves were doing so well that we shipped oranges. Because I remember as young novices, we did not have a real orange washing machine as we do now. We had great big tubs of water, and we
Yes,
had to
scrub
scrub the
brush.
oranges by the hours. And cold, it was so cold, our fingers got so cold. But we did the scrubbing and the cleaning, and then Sister Mary and Miss May, who was here, did the packing. And then the men would come and take the crates and bring them to the freight to ship them. And we did this for years.
Yeah, because we were still doing it when I was a novice. We had a washing machine at that time,
Yes.
but we did labels and we did packing and we did all of that for the shipping.
We did the scrubbing with the
Our
old-fashioned
machine was elbow
scrubbing
grease.
brush.
Yes. That was all in Mother Rosemary's time. It was great.
But those were happy years.
And then was it the next year that she sent them to New Orleans
The following year we went to New Orleans.
and then to Slidell?
No, Slidell first and then New Orleans.
Oh, Slidell first.
Okay.
Well, Mother Rosemary was interested in the missions, and after the sisters came from Texas, we were invited to go to Alphen to teach in the public school there, and she sent sisters to Alphen, Texas. And then we were invited to come to Slidell, Louisiana, and she sent Sister Immaculate. Sister Immaculate had opened Alphen, and then she went to Slidell to open Slidell, Our Lady of Lourdes in Slidell. Then the next year, I believe it was,
We went to New Orleans.
we went to St. Teresa's in New Orleans. And so there were the 3 missions opened.
What about
in-
Bogalusa?
Yes. And when was Bogalusa opened? Do you remember?
I think that that was maybe 4 or 5 years later than we had Bogalusa.
That was-
Ocala was in the early 30s also.
Yeah,
Yes.
really taught people.
Nobody's mentioned the council camp, have you?
Good counsel.
Oh, I
camp.
was there from
Oh.
45 to
Yes.
58 every summer.
And all of you were there at one time, weren't you?
That's where we could really tell you some funny stories about Good Counsel Camp.
Yes.
Maureen was there.
Yes, we were all
I
camp.
went, oh, good counsel camp, oh, yes. Oh, my
I
gosh.
was never at good counsel. Father Cummings' mother said to me one day, I believe this sister was at camp last summer. He said, no, they never send her because she's not an outdoor girl. So
Yeah.
I didn't get to go.
Oh, yes, Good
That's,
Counsel
um,
Camp.
But most of our sisters did spend several summers
Yeah.
at the catechetical camp at Good Counsel.
And not only that, we also taught, before Florida started opening Catholic schools, parochial schools, we went all over the state teaching religious vacation school in the summertime. We went to DeLand, to Newport Richey, Bartow, Lakeland, Zephyr Hills, Plant City, Blanton, Brooksville, you name it. And we had religious vacation schools in the summertime. And Good Counsel, before Good Counsel Camp was open, the diocese had camps at Camp Wingman in Avon Park. They rented it from the Episcopalians. And I remember 2 years when I was there, 2 summers, the place was infested with rattlesnakes and water moccasins. But it was nice. And then finally in '48, Monsignor Cummings built Good Counsel Camp at Lake Salapaca in Inverness, near Inverness or Floral City. And those were the days of the giant, because we had 8 cabins, no cabin for the sisters. We shared a cabin with some of the counselors. We shared bathroom facilities with the students, with the children. And but it was fun. We enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
You were camping.
We were camping, yes, indeed.
Yeah, we worked with Keith Simons, Bishop Keith Simons.
He was just a high school student at that time.
Bishop, not Larkin. I worked with Larkin in Miami, but
Larry Redmond.
John Glory, Quinlan, John Neff. We worked with all those. And Red Statter, they called him Blackie. Yes, he was.
Larry
Cunningham. Those were really grand summers. I really enjoyed those.
Yeah, those were good summers.
Were any of you sisters involved with Camp Chavita?
Yes, I taught art. I taught the art classes down here in that little, what was the science lab, that little brick building down here, down the way to the camp. We had all of our art classes in there. I can remember that very well.
How long was Camp Chavita in existence?
I can't remember how many years. Do you remember, Margaret?
Quite a few.
You said you were there in '52.
It was in the 50s.
It was when I came in '40s. It was.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
I don't know.
At least good 15 years.
1945, when I came, they had a camp that summer. I remember.
And how long did they have Camp Good Counsel?
You mean, how long did it last?
Did it
each summer,
exist?
or how
long
many years?
did it? How many years did that camp
Since
exist?
'48.
It's not important. It's still going.
Oh, it's still going.
It's still going.
Of course, we have not gone since the '60s. I think '60-something was the last year we went. But
They phased out the catechetical camp, and they
That's
just
right.
have art and craft.
it's no longer a
Yeah,
category.
John was born in '64, and I think he was 3 years old the last, so that would have been about '67. About right in there.
Nurse and director of the religious ed program and troubleshooter, and it was so funny. The kids would gold brick, you know, they wouldn't get up in the morning for services, and they wouldn't get up for the Bible class because they were sick. Well, that got to be a racket, and we were gold bricking, we knew they were. So I said to Father Cummings, I said, how about giving them some vegetable oil? Pretend it's, castor oil. So we got a brown bottle. Old John, the chef, and we put vegetable oil in there, and we put a sign on the castor oil. It got one of those great big stirring spoons in the kitchen here. So the head counselor and I went from cabin to cabin where the sick ones were, and took temperature, no fever. I think you're all right. No. Okay, well, here, dose of this. They thought they were taking castor oil. They weren't. They were taking just
Made them
vegetable
regular,
oil.
I bet.
The next morning, there wasn't one sick kid in the place. I mean, they were all up for the rest of the summer.
What happened in the 50s? Tell me about the 50s in the convent. What was going on?
Prioress from 51 to 58, and Camp Chavita was in session, as you remember. And Sister was very much involved with the school. The school had been accredited by Sister Carolyn's efforts in together with everybody else. in the late 40s. And so keeping up with accreditation and getting qualified teachers and teaching the students. And I think the enrollment started getting larger in the 50s.
Well, there was one year in the year I came to the academy in summer of 54. I started as a freshman in September of 54. There were just 20 boarders that year because there'd been a purge the year before. There had been evidently some people that weren't here for the best reasons or whatever. So there were a large number of freshmen and sophomores, and a few girls had stayed on from the 7th and 8th grade, but otherwise, then it began to build up. And I was here at the academy for 4 years. I graduated in 58, those 4 years at Sister, and she was very involved. Sister Mary Grace was very involved in the academy. Most of the sisters who were here at the convent were also involved in teaching. Sister Anna Marie was in the library. Sister Melda was teaching home ec. Sister Anna Marie also taught me algebra and Spanish. Sister Mary Grace taught religion. And then we had Mrs. Gentry doing the business subjects and so forth. But as Sister said, keeping up with accreditation was important. We had to take all these hours and put in the right amounts of time and so forth. And most of the other sisters were on missions because they were teaching in Miami, Sarasota, Venice,
Jacksonville.
Lakeland,
I
Jacksonville.
was at Jacksonville Beach.
In Jacksonville Beach.
And
Bishop
Ocala.
Hurley, did you mention that Bishop Hurley had asked the sisters to come back from outside the state? Diocese of St. Augustine encompassed the entire state of Florida. 1949-50, he asked the sisters, the Benedictines, to come back into the state and teach in the schools he was opening there. After the Second World War, there was a great upsurge in building Catholic schools and also in people coming to religious communities. We had a large number of people who came to the community after the Second World War up to about the time of the council, like maybe 45 to 65. The number almost doubled of membership in the community. And I remember when I was in the academy, almost every graduating class, several people were expected to enter the convent. If you remember, it was a lot of talk about who's going to enter the convent and who's not going to. And
That's also
that
the
kind of
same
thing.
time that many of us went away to study.
That's right, summer school.
Yes,
Sisters
summer
went away to
schools
summer school. Catholic U and Notre Dame and Barry in Miami.
Marquette.
Marquette. And,
When the bishop started helping us out with our education in the early 40s, that was when he gave us the call. He wanted us to come back, and he would help us with education. Then we started attending Catholic schools much more. We had been attending state universities before that because it was cheaper. But so these schools that you mentioned where Bishop Hurley helped to finance the going to Atchison, Kansas, and to Catholic University, and so on.
And those were the years that many people got their college degree, their first
Yes.
college degree.
And then was the period of opening the missions. Now that was in the early, in 49 and 50s. So did we talk about that this morning or yesterday? Yesterday. We opened
Jacksonville was 49, wasn't it? And Sarasota was 49. I think Holy Family was 50.
And Venice was about 5 years later.
It was a little bit later, yes.
But still in the 50s. So there was a big push during Sister Caroline's administration for opening missions in Florida and sending our sisters out there, so that all the sisters at the State of Holy Name were very much involved in the academy, but about half of the sisters were on mission.
Yes, the novices and the postulants were here getting trained, and then as soon as people made vows, they either went out to teach or they went away to school to get at least a year. I made vows in 59, in December of 59, and in January I went with 5 others out to Yankton, South Dakota, to a Benedictine college there to get some college work done before I started teaching, before all of us started teaching then in September of 60. also in that 1950s, and even in Sister Carolyn's time, there was discussion about needing a new building. And we have in the archives, there are plans, various architects' ideas going back to the 40s of what the new house would look like. And it wasn't really until 1959 that we got permission. In the 1960s, we began building this building and to move into it.
Then that's where Sister DeChantal came in.
Sister DeChantal was elected in 58, yeah. And she tell you the famous story about how she got permission for us to... The bishop wanted, or the bishop had offered to help us build, but he wanted us to move to a city like St. Pete, and we sort of resisted that. Then the building was condemned by the fire department. The old building was very, you know, you all know what it was like. And my understanding of the story is that Sister went to see the bishop in late 1959 to ask, or maybe late 1958, whenever it was. She went up to see him, Sister DeChantal and someone who went with her, and they had the plans and they had how they thought it could be done, and the bishop either wasn't going to see them or didn't have time, and the answer was going to be no again or not at this time. And Sister just got very exasperated and started to cry and then yelled and from what I understand, hit her hand on the secretary's desk and said, "I will not go back and tell those sisters no one more time. I want to see the bishop." And so that's how she got in to see him, and he did realize we did know what we were doing and we could probably get this building built, so he gave permission. So it had been a long time coming, but I think her frustration probably expressed that of 10 or 15 years of other people trying to get an answer from him. He was not particularly fond of religious orders, particularly those that were independent, and we're basically independent. We own our own land and our own buildings. Now we're responsible for our own debts, but on the other hand, we're also free from a certain amount of control from the bishop. We are a pontifical community. At that time, we weren't. We were under his control. We were a diocesan community until the late 60s.
And one of the reasons that he delayed giving us permission to build, like Sister said, 15 or 20 years that they had asked to get permission to build, was that he thought if we went to a larger city, we'd get much more recruits. And so the sisters took it seriously and went all over the state of Florida looking for a site. And the best one they found, the only one really that seemed to have promise, was in St. Petersburg. And it's now, the property is now part of the park of the Sunshine
Parkway.
Parkway.
The later period of the first 100 years produced new challenges that, although risky, brought opportunities for growth and change. The farm was sold to finance new construction, and the beloved old convent was replaced by a new Holy Name Priory. Holy Name Academy was officially closed after 75 years, and the sisters made plans to build dormitories and a cafeteria to house and feed St. Leo College girls. Vatican II created changes, not only in the celebration of the traditional liturgy. It left the sisters re-examining the purposes of their community as they faced dwindling vocations and flights from the religious life. Although education remained a primary focus, the community reached out once again to meet the needs of the times. The sisters became social workers, gerontologists, Montessori teachers, family counselors, mayors, pastoral ministers, musicians, and even caterers. And, as St. Benedict taught, they continued to provide hospitality to those in need through oblate programs, retreats, and ministries to the poor, the sick, and the elderly.
Started, Sister was a very energetic, organized, get-it-done kind of person. She had background in business before she came to the community. And so after she had permission to build a new priory building, during that time we also began working with the monks toward building St. Leo College, which involved building dormitories, which would be Marmion Hall, and a cafeteria, Marmion Cafeteria, and then several years later the villa across the street in Snyder. But these things got started, and Sister de Chantal's time. It was also the time of the Second Vatican Council, so there were many changes coming in our lives within the community. Our prayer life changed. We went from praying Latin into praying in English. We shortened our office. We changed certain parts of it. The Mass changed, as many people will remember. There was also a time when religious communities were to go back and begin looking at who they were and why they were. And all of this was, as I say, getting started. There was a lot of talk about what's going to happen. Many of the people who had come in the last 20 years, who've been with the community maybe 15 to 20 years or so, began asking themselves, is this really what I came for? Is this what I want to do? Either the community was changing too much or not changing enough. So people began leaving kind of in droves. In 1966, well, in 64, we also joined the Federation of St. Scholastica, which is a group of 25 or so other Benedictine communities similar to ours. A large one in Kansas, about 400 people. The sisters in Warren, Ohio have about 14 or 15. But coming together for mutual support, mutual study of what it was going to mean to be a Benedictine and what we were going to do in the new church after Vatican II helped us to feel not quite so alone.
I think one of the other changes too was the change of dress.
Oh yes, that was
at that time.
A lot of discussion, a lot of pain, a lot of personal decisions being made, and we did some experimenting with various kinds of how are we going to dress and how are we going to pray. And also it was a time when we began facing the economics of closing the academy, losing members, and also having to withdraw. We could no longer staff missions. Sisters were coming home. How are we going to support ourselves? With the college, a number of the younger people were sent away to study full-time to get degrees in 3 or 4 years rather than in the 10 or 15 it had taken people to do it going to summer schools. And in 1966, Sister de Chantal resigned her office. She was in her second term, and Sister Carmen was elected. And Sister Carmen presided over, I would guess you would say, sort of a tumultuous turmoil time. Many people were leaving. We didn't know whether or how we were going to continue as a community. The college was on rocky ground. It became evident we were going to have to incorporate the college separate from the religious communities, or else we might all wind up in bankruptcy. At the same time, we were looking forward with hope because we built another dormitory under Sister Carmen's time. And Sister Carmen was a very kind sort of person. Even though she would get very nervous about what was happening, she let people find themselves. And I think many people during her time came to the decision that they had to leave the community. And she, as prioress, I think felt that doubly hard than the rest of us. But it was difficult because you would come home, and I would come home, and there'd be people my age or slightly older. Suddenly they would be here no more. And we didn't lose anybody we wanted to lose. They were all good people. We would have loved to have all of them here, but at the same time we had to realize we were all trying to do what God wanted. But it was a very nervous time. And it began to settle down at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. The college enrollment began to get a little bit better and more stable. We began to see we were going to make it. Fewer people were leaving, and Sister Mary David and others were making final vows, so there were people coming to make commitment for the future. And in 1972, Sister Mary Dorothy was elected prioress, and she's the first prioress who retained the name sister. Before that, all the prioresses were mother. And that was another change, a sign of the times that we were talking about. It wasn't going to be so much a community where the prioress was the mother and did all of the thinking and the nurturing and all that. That it was more a group of peers and grown-up women in a spiritual relationship with one another. And we got more in touch with what it meant to be Benedictine, and that it was really okay not to teach school, that there were other things we could do that were necessary. We attended meetings almost every other year, the Federation of St. Scholastica, studying this question of what is this rule of St. Benedict that was written in the 5th and 6th century, what does it mean now? And we learned a lot from those women, many of them. There were several meetings held here during the 70s of this national organization on formation, on the future, on the rule. So although we were far away and small, we were also kind of in the center of things and able to get a great deal of help from this federation. And Sister Mary Dorothy, again, kind of settled down and organized things. She was very organized, and things got planned, and it was that kind of a time, 72 to 75, she served. She also, I think, was the first prioress who held a full-time job outside of being prioress. She was working at St. Leo Library, and I think at that time she was either assistant to the director or some post like that, which was a new thing for us to get used to, that the prioress wasn't going to be in her office, somewhat like families have to get used to the fact that when you come home from school, mommy might not be there, sort of idea. You know, we were all sort of growing up.
Well, I think at that time too, there was also talk, the economics was better, and also there were talks with the bishop and the school boards of the diocesan schools to upgrade the salaries of the sisters. So that was another big change that was coming.
Yes.
Things began to look up.
Yes, part of the renewal for the church was to face the fact that the brothers and the sisters had practically been a slave labor group that worked for nothing except a roof over their heads and something to eat. And the communities were responsible to pay for our education, our health care, anything, you know, over and above. And so the bishops began to see they had an obligation there. And I think recently they've even become more serious about it, because they realize there are people who taught in the Catholic schools 50 and 60 years who are now needing health care, nursing care, and just general, because they're up in their 90s and 100s and whatnot, and need someone to take care of them. So what else from the 60s and 70s?
Oh, I think you covered it well.
How about your time as prioress?
Well, that was wild.
What years were you prioress?
Pardon?
What years were you prioress?
1975 to 86. And I think basically what we did was build on the foundation and move on. We did, we had more involvement with the Federation, with the college. We began working toward an equal partnership, which we have just been able to get into a real working contract as to what we contribute and what we get paid for at the college and what our relationship is to them. When we started with the monks, it was two religious communities working together for ministry and service, and it was all in the family. Well, now it's become a much bigger operation, and the monks are even less involved now than we are, so we have now a contract with the college. And we worked that during 75 to 86. We began feeling, I think, better about ourselves, and that we were okay. We were going to be okay. We were blessed with some very strong vocations, women of faith who came to give themselves, and we set up a formation program that seems to have worked so far. And we I guess have withdrawn from teaching, except down at St. Anthony's in San Antonio. The newer sisters, the sisters who are coming in, are preparing for such things as pastoral ministry, theology, and as Sister Dorothy mentioned, work in the Priory. We opened the Priory Early Childhood Center. We'd always had a kindergarten, if you remember. Sister Rita had her kindergarten. Yes. Then Sister Roberta received the Montessori training and began a Montessori school. She had that during Sister Dorothy's time, the early 70s. She started that. When I became prioress, the people in Ocala were interested in having a Montessori school. Sister was interested in going to a different living situation and to helping them start up. So she went out to the mission in Ocala. Sister Donna had a traditional kindergarten here, and then we had a Miss Lydia Benome come, who was a trained Montessorian, to continue on with our Montessori program. That expanded into a daycare center, and we had children from 6 months to about 6 years. That continues. That kind of expanded during the 70s because it was really needed. Now the county has mandatory kindergarten for everybody, so we have younger children. We don't keep them through kindergarten right now. They go on to one of the other schools. We have them younger than that. We also got quite involved with the migrant work. We have a large Mexican population that comes in to pick the fruit and to do the other vegetable harvesting. We had Sister Elaine and Sister Carmen very involved in that work. Sister Elaine through St. Rita's Church, Sister Carmen through the county school board, the public school board. And they worked with them, and then towards the end of the 70s, the pastor in Dade City was able to make contact with the Catequistas of Our Lady of the Light from Mérida in Mexico. So they come every year for about 6 months, and they live with us. And we provided housing and community and so forth, and support for them and a car in order to help them work with the Mexican people. And then we have also had to admit we've been aging. So we have more of the older sisters at home who help out with the things that need to be done at home. Of course, the prayers, they're always there for prayers, and then they help out with the domestic chores, with the reading, sitting at the front desk, taking care of all those little things that make the place run smoother. So we have that. What else did we have? 75 to 86. We got involved, well, a little bit more. Sister Lucy had been on the town commission. The town of St. Leo has a 5-member town commission. And Sister Lucy served on it in the late 60s. And then Sister Morris served for a while, and then I served during the 70s. Sister Mildred is serving now.
And I think Sister Irma's also on.
Sister Irma has been working with the Planning Commission, and so has Sister Carolyn.
So you really branched out more into community work than education
Yeah.
in recent years.
And I think we like to hang on to our education. And you can put almost anything under that. Sister Margaret, for a time in the 70s, also did some adult education. Right out here in the dining room, we had some folks coming learning how to read, preparing for GED exams. And again, things people asked us to do or we needed. We also got involved with the local spouse abuse shelter, providing food, providing furniture for the house that they were going to set up. Sister Patricia Ann went and studied and got credentials in family counseling, and she set up a little counseling center and practiced there for local people. And let's see, Sister DeChantal worked in the diocesan religious education program over in St. Pete.
Did you tell about PECC?
Yes, we talked about PECC is Priory Early Childhood Center, and we have 3 buildings over there. I think we can accommodate 100 children over there now. And Sister Dorothy's been working over there. Sister Mary Romana works over there. That was one of the areas also where the new members, the new recruits, spent some of their training time at the Early Childhood Center. Some of them have spent time helping in the kitchen. Some have spent time helping with housekeeping, helping Sister Juliana with the dormitory housekeeping.
And some of us go gophering.
Yes. Yes, there always seems to be an errand that has to be run. Now that's something that's really kind of new in the 60s and 70s. I remember when I first came in the 50s, the community had, I think, 1 car. Now I believe there are 12 or 13 out there when they're all parked, which is hardly ever all parked. And people need them to go, to run errands and to do various things. Another interesting thing that happened after the council was we began to get an allowance. Before that, we never had any cash money to spend. If you needed something, you needed toothpaste or soap or new clothes or whatever, you wrote a note, "Dear Mother, please may I have," and you listed. And then you could hand those in on Saturday, and Sister Treese would fill the regular items, and if it was a big item like new shoes or clothes or something, then Mother would have to check that you really needed it and so forth. And when you got permission, the community provided. There were sisters who worked in the sewing room who made all the habits and so forth, and we ordered the underclothes and so forth from the supplier of sisters' clothes and that kind of thing. Well, after the Vatican Council, we were looking at ways that we could be aware of this idea of poverty and money. So we receive a monthly allowance, and I think we started out, each sister got $20 a month. And you had to arrange to buy your own personal supplies and so forth. Now it's on a sliding scale. You can have up to $50 a month. and then we get a little list that says what you're supposed to cover. Your personal entertainment and your postage and charity if you want to do that, plus, you know, your personal hygiene and that sort of thing.
And your clothes.
And your clothes. Yeah.
Okay, Sister Jermaine came to us from another community. She's a transfer nun.
She was a
Palatine sister, yes. But I think that the rule of the Palatine nuns is also based on the rule of Saint Benedict. And Sister has been with us for a number of years, 15, 16,
She was here
20
since
years.
1971.
1971.
I mean, affiliated with the community. She made a vow of stability here, I think in 76 or 77.
Yes. And she's been prioress now for 3 years.
3 years, since 86.
Yes, she's been the prioress here. She's a very quiet kind of person.
She's from Belize, which used to be British Honduras. And she was a formation directress in her previous community. She was in the United States being educated when she met, I believe it was our sister Miriam in Kentucky.
And Roberta.
And Roberta, and Sister Roberta. And got to know them, and that was the time when people were re-examining their vocations and so forth, you know. And
so she decided that this is where she
yeah,
wanted to try.
She decided she would like to try here, so she came, and that's the process of transfer involves a certain probationary period, whether the new person who thinks they want to come really wants to come, and whether the community wants to accept them, because the only way you can be a member here is if all the members vote you in. So she came to live with us, and we said yes. We thought, you know, she would fit in with us, and she did too. Then she came home. She was in Venice. She taught in Venice during those years. She came here to the Priory to spend a year, which would be sort of comparable to a novitiate year, when she would do specific studies, and Sister Carolyn was assigned to help her answer questions, read with her, talk about it, so she'd know what it was all about. And then she decided she wanted to ask to become a permanent member, and we agreed, and we voted just like we would on anyone else, and she became a member of the community. She was principal at St. Anthony's School from 1976 to 86 when she was elected prioress. And she brings a great deal of richness to the community, because she has she was telling me the other night her Jesuit training and background from her first community, besides the fact that they did study the rule of St. Benedict and look at it. And she
did her studying too in London and in Germany.
Yes.
While she was being trained. She was being trained to be a formation person.
She went on a pilgrimage with the other American Benedictine prioresses last year, I believe, to all, not to all, but to a number of the Benedictine houses in Europe that were affiliated with the American Benedictines. And she really enjoyed that very much. She brought home tapes and shared it with us and so forth. And she's a very quiet, gentle person, and she's very concerned with person's spiritual well-being. And again, I think that builds on where we had come from. We are at a time now where we do have, as Sister Margaret said, the leisure as well as the encouragement to spend a little bit more time with our reading and our prayer and our spiritual life and so forth.
What are the challenges that Sister Germaine and the order are facing right now?
I think the challenge is to be contemporary, to listen to the Church and to listen to the Spirit, to provide for the elderly who have given us all we have, and to be sure that they get the respect and the appreciation and the gratitude that they certainly do. Because if you look around here and you know the hard times these women came through, there's a real challenge in providing well for them and communicating our thanks to them, while at the same time giving the attention to the young people that they need for their training. And it's a challenge to listen, and I think that's a gift she has. She's able to listen.
And she's very much involved with the slogan that we have for the centennial, which is to recall the past, celebrate the present, and embrace the future. And she made a point of a community retreat this year would have that as its purpose, and especially embracing the future. Sister Ann Stedman from Colorado Springs gave us our retreat. And that was the theme, was to embrace the future, whatever it might be. And like Sister said, it's the contemporary thing of, and right now it's still the college.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's also an emphasis on the contemplative dimension of our life. I think we're at a crossroads. We're going to have to decide if we're going to be monastic or apostolic, if we are going to focus on community and prayer and being here and doing what's needed, or if we're going to say there's a particular work we are all going to put our energy behind, and that's the priority. And right now, I think part of Sister Germain's challenge is to hold the impatient people who think they already know what it is, to keep them content, and also to encourage those who aren't really sure they know what's happening or that they want it to go on, so that we can, the challenge is, I think, for us to come together and articulate a common vision. We may be getting ready to do that, but I'm not sure we've soaked up enough of who we are and where we are at this particular point to be able to articulate this is the community vision. And that's a challenge, because you can't go too long without knowing where you're going.
And I think the other challenge is in the formation of the young people that are coming in. We have, what, 2 of them, 3, that are coming in, and it's what are we going to do, how are we going to train them, because they've already been out in the business world, so the training program has to be completely changed to meet their needs and also to meet the needs of the community.
Mm-hmm. And because they have professional training, then there can be more time and emphasis put on the spiritual training, the development. We have a requirement of new members. One of our criteria for membership is that the person have a capacity for community. And that sounds big, and it goes everything from being able to pray with others, to being able to take your turn washing dishes, and to have your schedule all messed up and to graciously do what needs doing, to share the stuff you have. And it's a very difficult thing, and it's more difficult for a person, as Sister Teresa was saying, who lived on her own for 11 years, owned her own home, came and went as she wanted, set up her own social life and her own business schedule, then to come and suddenly you're in a group of 30 other people, all of whom must be considered in many of the decisions that you make that you never would have thought of before. How much noise can you make in your room? Just something like, when are you going to blow dry your hair? Well, if you're in your own home, there's no problem. But if you're living in a small room and there are people on either side, is someone sleeping? Is this going to disturb? So capacity for community is something that really needs to be developed, especially when women are being told about their independence and their value and their career, and they should not be defined by others. And then to have somebody who really wants to come and be part of us, to be ready to develop some community living skills. That's a big thing in formation these days. And you can imagine what it's like if you get 30 women together, to have them live together in peace. And just when you get it, you know who all is here, and you know all of their quirks and idiosyncrasies, and you can negotiate from day to day without war breaking out, then 2 or 3 new people come in. And then everybody has to readjust, And sometimes after you've been here 50 or 60 years, you can get to the point where I'm not adjusting again. They can adjust to me,
I bet.
Yeah. Thank God we don't have too many of those, Our older sisters are great. It's us in the middle that are the big problem.
How about a couple of funny stories, funny memories?
Sister Helen has a great memory of my enthusiasm for teaching.
I was the principal at St. Paul's in Jacksonville Beach, and Sister Jerome was sent to be the 8th grade teacher, and that was her first year teaching. And of course, Sister Jerome has a very apt way of being funny and coming out with all some kinds of expressions. And at that time, the classrooms, there was no limit as to how many students you could have in a classroom. And neither the principal nor the teachers had anything to say about it. The pastor said, this child is coming to school. Here's another parent that wants his children in school. So we just kept piling them in. And I think that year she was teaching 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And she had mostly boys. How many? 63 children?
63. I had wall-to-wall children.
Wall-to-wall people. And, you know, there comes a time when you want to say, that's it, I've had it. Well, that was happened to be one of those mornings. We were all getting ready to go to school. We had been to church. And she didn't, I don't think you got up for Mass that morning.
No, I was blowing the whole wad.
And after breakfast, I went upstairs and I said, aren't you going to school today? And she said, she was standing in the middle of the room and she said, I've had it, I'm quitting, I'm not going to teach anymore. I've had it. I said, fine, so we don't
Real
have
sympathy.
it. I said, just go back to bed. And she said, who'll take my class? I said, we'll find out, we'll find somebody. So we went to school and I took over the classroom and gave them their work and so forth. About 10 o'clock, there was a very timid knock on the door. And she said, I think I can make it. That was the one story. The other story...
That was the only time I ever missed teaching when I was supposed to teach.
And she did a good job. She did a very good job.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway.
The other funny story I think is very, very interesting is when we made the changes, it was in 1967 when we changed.
That was just
and
plain
we had
nasty.
told the students that when we got back from the Christmas holidays that we would be dressed differently. We would not be dressed the same way. And I remember going to school that morning, but Sister and I were the only two teaching there. Yes, we were just the two.
Yeah, just the two of us. There were lay teachers, but we were the only sisters there. And we were in our black suits and our ruffly blouses.
And the suits are just below the knee.
Oh, yes.
And we had a little veil on, I think.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And we walked over to school that morning, and there was a little boy came to meet us at the ambulatory, and he looked at us, and he got in between the two of us, took our hands, and we walked down to the office. And he was giggling the whole time. And we finally said, well, what's so funny? And he said, I don't know, but you look different. But then, when she got to her class, which was also 8th grade, she got behind the desk, and she wouldn't come out the whole day.
I got whistled at. I didn't like that either.
Stayed behind the desk, and finally, about 2 or 3 o'clock, I don't know how you did your writing on the board, but the kids told me afterwards that you tried to reach as far as you could without ever showing anything. Well, finally, in the afternoon, one of the boys said, Sister, you can come out from behind the desk. We know you have legs. And I think
well, they whistled at me when I walked in. Wasn't particularly ready for that. And I'm really not a lace blouse sort of person. But then, that semester I wore the black suit and the lace blouse and was really miserable. I'm sure it was miserable to live with, too. And then I came home and I went back to wearing my habit. Then I was going away to school and Sister Carmen caught me and she said, I think you're young enough to be able to change. I want you to change. So I changed into something else. I don't remember what it was at that time, but then I went down to Miami with the Dominican sisters. And I can't sew, so I'm at the mercy of whoever will make my clothes for me. Right now it's Sister Pauline, but at that point it was my friend who was a Dominican sister. So she made me a black Dominican habit, and that's what I've been wearing ever since. But I think we went shopping one time in Jacksonville. Sister Juliana was in charge of the kitchen. And I was in charge, I was the youngest, so I went with the superior to push the grocery cart. And Sister Juliana would write out the list. And she wrote cherries, and we've got cherries. Well, after 3 or 4 weeks, cherries kept appearing, but we never got these cherries. We brought home a big jar of maraschino cherries, because we figured that must be what she wanted.
We kept wondering, where are the cherries? What is she doing with the
What
cherries?
is she doing with the cherries? And so finally it was on the list again, and Sister Helen said, I'm not bringing any more home until I find out what's happening. We came home, and Sister Juliana's going through the thing. And she said, you two are the world's worst shoppers. Where are the Cheerios? And we looked at one another and we thought, ha ha, those were the cherries. So at the end of the year, we had an awards banquet in the convent, and we gave Sister Helen a big round. It was one of those, it was like a dessert dish, one of those foil dessert dishes. It was gold, with a couple of cherries in it. It was the world's worst shopper. And we pinned it on her as her award for the year.
These contemporary women, whose legacy has been to meet the needs of the times for the past 1,500 years, will embrace the challenges of the future. The future is admittedly unknown and uncertain, and they will risk change at times in order to grow and flourish in the love of God, just as they have for the first 100 years.